Thanks, Kimberly. Hi, everyone. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. Okay, great. So before we kick off with the presentation by Malena from Elsevier, we wanted to give a very quick reintroduction to ORCID and our Certified Service Provider program. So let me go ahead and do that. So for those who are new to their role in research or who are new to an adjacent industry supporting research, who might not be familiar with ORCID, we're a global nonprofit member organization and an open infrastructure provider. We've been around since 2012. We're sustained entirely by fees from our member organizations, and those include universities and research institutions, publishers, funders, government agencies, etc. And we're guided by our values and founding principles, and our mission and focus is on enabling disambiguation for researchers and linking them reliably with their research activities, their research outputs, and their organizational affiliations. We're governed by a board of directors who are elected from our membership base. And if we move on, we provide three core infrastructure services. So there is the ORCID ID, which many people will be familiar with. That's the 16-string number there with the ORCID URL in front of it, which allows the researcher to uniquely identify themselves. And they can use that wherever and whenever they need to be uniquely identified when submitting to journals, when applying for funding, etc. Accompanying the ORCID ID is an ORCID record, which can be thought of as a digital CV or profile, which allows the researcher to catalog all of the data and information related to their activities and their organizations and their contributions to research. And the third and most important service are the ORCID APIs. These are application programming interfaces, which allow different systems to plug into the ORCID registry and exchange data back and forth with ORCID records. And this service actually allows different vendor systems, different publisher and funder and university systems to exchange data with ORCID records, saving the researcher time and effort because they don't have to manually enter data in all of these different systems that they might interact with on a day-to-day basis. In terms of ORCID's global adoption and reach, as I mentioned, we've been around since 2012. We're very much embedded in the global research ecosystem. We have users, those are researchers who have registered ORCID IDs in over 250 countries. And we have member organizations in 65 different countries, including 28 national consortia representing universities and research institutions, and one regional consortium launched last year as well. We have over 10.1 million yearly active researchers. Those are researchers who have used their ORCID ID to sign into a system or updated their record or granted permission to a trusted organization to update their record using those APIs. And we have over 1,400 organizational members around the world who have together integrated over 6,400 different systems with ORCID, exchanging data back and forth with those records. So what we have here is a representation of what we call the virtuous circle. Everything ORCID does puts the researcher at the center of what we do. And as I say, our aim is to allow them to disambiguate themselves and save themselves time and effort when they interact with these various different systems which rely on data. So these systems plug into the ORCID API and exchange data back and forth with the ORCID records with the user's permission once they have signed in and authenticated their ORCID ID. And in terms of pure and university systems, this would be in the discovery and profile system side or the institutional system side, where the researcher has logged in and authenticated their ORCID ID in those systems and granted permission to their university to read data and import data from their records and also add data to the records. So Marlena will be speaking a little bit more about how Pure contributes to ORCID records in her presentation. But you can see that all of these different systems interact with the ORCID registry and exchange data back and forth. So again, saving the research time and effort, but also saving the system vendors time and effort from having to build many different integrations within their different systems. So the ORCID Certified Service Provider Program, what is it? It's basically a free voluntary certification program provided by ORCID to vendors and service providers who've built an integration with the API. It allows them to review and certify their ORCID integration with ORCID, and that demonstrates to the ORCID member community that it's following best practices defined by ORCID and the community, and thus ensures faster, more reliable integration routes for members. So rather than universities or publishers and others having to build system integration themselves, they could rely on an ORCID certified service provider system, and that allows immediate plug and play with the ORCID registry. Lastly, I wanted to provide just an overview of the program as it stands. So this is quite a busy slide, but the key takeaways here are the benefits to organizations using a CSP on the right, and the benefits to vendors from actually becoming a certified service provider with ORCID. And I want to emphasize again as well that the ORCID certified service provider systems are an ecosystem of different systems that are best in class, as it were, in terms of building their integration and interacting with ORCID. So different institutions and organizations using these systems can ensure a consistent user experience for their researchers, and also ensure that they are receiving the service that they require from these different systems and exchanging data with ORCID records. Okay, and I will end there and pass over to Marlena to introduce herself and start her presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Let me see if I can share my slide. Just put it into presenter mode. Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for inviting me for the webinar. I'm really eager to tell a little bit about how we integrate with ORCID and how we decided on moving towards being a certified ORCID provider. First of all, just a small introduction. My name is Malene Knudsen. I work as a product manager for what we in Pure call our integration team, meaning that I'm the product manager for everything more or less that goes in and out of Pure, ORCID being one of them. I have a little bit of an experience with Pure. I've been working with Pure now for about 25 years, first as a Pure administrator out at the local university in Denmark. I'm sitting in our development hub up in Denmark. I transferred into to Elsevier and have been working here now for a little less than 15 years. First in our support, I've done a lot of training. I worked as a subject matter expert and recently moved into this product management position. So a little bit about me. So me and Pure, we go way back, good friends, been for many years. Just a little brief introduction for those of you who are not familiar with Pure. I won't go into too many details, but Pure is a CRIS system, meaning it's a system that institutions can use to sort of gather information about what research is taking place within their institution. It gives you access to, so we provide the system, we help you get data in, but all the data in here is owned by the institution itself, where we provide the system for it. Pure offers you the option of sort of capturing the full body of research happening within your university. That could be research output, publication being published. It can be activities the researcher attends, projects they are running, and how they got granted that. We have a lot of data, courses, equipment can be stored and used in Pure. We gather that data in here, and you can connect this data, making sure that you tell the full story of your research output. On top of gathering the information, we can help you make sure that the data is up to date should something happen, and we can help you validate that the quality of that data is okay. On top of Pure as a core module where you can gather all of this information, we have a set of modules. On top of that, we have an award management module that can capture all the things around your award process, pre-awards up until being granted the money. We have a CV module the researcher can use when they add data into the system, get it out in CV formats for various purposes. There's a portal on top of Pure where you can display to the entire world what is happening within your research institution. There's a very thorough reporting module where you can report on every aspects of what's happening within your data. We build assessment modules for various regions, countries. And on top of that, we have something called our community module, where you can aggregate data for different Pure installations up until one joint community where you can showcase everything happening, for instance, within a country, within a region, or within a subject field. So these are sort of add-on modules to Pure that you can use to tailor Pure to work in the way you would like it for your institution. We get data from many, many sources into Pure. We get it from local institutional sources like HR systems and so on. And we also gather information from a lot of other sources to get data populated into Pure. And also the other way, we export it into different other systems once data is collected in here. So we sort of see Pure as the institution's golden system of records when it comes to research output. We have a ton of integrations that can help the institutions getting the data into Pure that they would like. Some of these are sort of within different subject areas that may or may not be relevant to all institutions, and some of them are sort of generic sources that can bring data into your Pure. On top of that, a lot of outbound integrations where we push data from Pure to various other sources that can reuse the data that has been collected in Pure for various purposes. And as you probably, if you looked and were very quickly, could see that ORCID is both an internal, so an inbound integrations where we can get data from ORCID, and we can also push data to ORCID. And all of that, once we import all of that data into Pure, and when we export all of that data into Pure, we need to make sure that we don't mess up the research ecosystem. We need to make sure that when we import something from a source, that we do our very best to import it and link it up against the correct researcher and the correct organization. And the same happens when we push data out in the world. We need to make sure that we tell whoever is picking up on that data the exact information. Who is this person? And not only relying on the name of the author or the name of the person. And by doing so, we actually do our very best. One of the sources that we tend to rely quite a bit on is ORCID, so the person ID numbers. And I'm going to go a little bit into details on how we do that. But just saying that we go hand in hand with ORCID and have done so for many, many years. I said that I have been working with Pure for about 25 years. Pure as a quiz system have existed for a little less than 25 years. And we have integrated with ORCID since the 2016. This was where we built our first direct ORCID integration. And the first thing we do was we allowed for exporting data from within Pure. So data that has been collected in Pure, we could push that out to the researcher's ORCID profile. So he didn't have to type that in again if it already existed in Pure. Over the years, we have expanded on our ORCID integrations. I would say close to 1,000,000 times, but I have highlighted a few things here, a few updates where we have expanded on ORCID both in the way that we export data, but also using ORCID as an import source. So you can both push to ORCID and you can import to ORCID. And of course, we make sure that it doesn't go into loops. So you're pushing and importing the same thing again. We can handle that. So you only import things from ORCID that you haven't pushed to ORCID. One of the latest things that we have been doing is that in 2024, we were, I don't know, rewarded. Can we call it that? Being an ORCID certified service provider. It came in 2024, and I want to talk a little bit on how that came into place. So first of all, we wanted to make sure that we did the very best we could with the data we have in Pure. We wanted to make sure that we didn't pollute the ecosystem. We wanted to make sure that we were best in class when it came to handling ORCID IDs. So this was why we looked into the direction of being a certified ORCID certified service provider. Sorry, it's not easy to say. So that was the reason why we went in that direction. We already had a lot of clients who were integrating with ORCID, and we just wanted to make sure that our clients understood that we were doing the best we could with the IDs that they provided in the system. This was, I just added this slide here, but I think Shiv have already mentioned what it means to be a certified service provider. What we did was we looked into what requirements do ORCID have for us to being certified? What do we need to adhere to? And this was the list what we ran into at that point. And when we looked through this list, we were so close to being able to actually already check mark these things and say, yes, we are already doing this. But there was a few things that we needed to change in our logic in the Pure. One of them is that we are now only relying on authorized ORCIDs. So when we import something and when we push something out of Pure, we only push stuff that where the ID have been authorized by the researcher himself. The researcher has logged into Pure and said, yes, this is my ID. Only those come into play when we import and export in Pure. That was one of the things we changed. Then we added some more help text here and there in Pure to make it easier for the researcher to understand what was happening. And we added in a few links so we made it more easy for our researchers to authorize their ID and build a connection between Pure and ORCID. It worked already, we just made it more clear. So we went through all of that, and in that process, we had a lot of talks with ORCID. We had some meetings where we discussed what was happening in Pure. We demoed how Pure worked. We discussed what was needed in us to be certified. We implemented some of these changes here and there, made it clear to our researchers, to our clients, and then we did a demo again about what we have done in Pure, and we got certified. For me, as an outsider, it was actually for us quite an easy task because Pure was uh, very much up to date on it. But it was very nice for us to get the check mark, to get ORCID also to certify that we did the very best we could. So to talk a little bit how Pure works or how the ORCID integration works in Pure. Pure comes with two sort of ways of working. You can either have the access to the public ORCID API. If you have that, you can import records into Pure. If you have set that up in Pure, we can import records from ORCID. The researcher can go in if they have authorized, they can import records from ORCID. And if they are authorized, we can set up sort of an automated search for this specific researcher. So based on his ORCID ID, once a week, we will check, is there anything new in ORCID that should be pulled into Pure? We will let him know, hey, you have some record. Would you like to import those? You can store your ORCID, you can authenticate it, and you can show your ORCID ID up on our Pure portal where there's a link to your ORCID profile. So this is if you have the public API as an institution, you will be able to import, authorize, and showcase your ORCID. If you have a member API, you have much more options. You, on top of being able to still import, you can set up these automated search, but now you're also able to export your content to ORCID. So whatever you have in Pure, you can tell Pure to please export that going over to ORCID so your ORCID profile is up to date with what is in Pure. We're a big fan of this export and import functionality. Sometimes we tell our clients, if you are working in this Pure here, but you're moving to another institution, well, you can export everything from Pure, and then you can import again once you get to a new institution. So it's a way of research mobility. You can export it and let ORCID handle some of your CVs, like NIH CVs and so on. So importing and exporting depending on what membership you have with ORCID as an institution. But most important, we want the researchers to log into Pure and authorize that the ORCID ID you have in Pure is actually your ORCID ID. It is the correct one, and we want you to sort of tie these two profiles together. I'm going to show you a little bit on how to do this. First of all, it is something that we require and ORCID require that the researcher himself or herself do. It's not something you can do for them. They will have to log in and do it for them. For those of you who are familiar with Pure, you would know in some cases you can go in and pretend to be a researcher and do stuff on his behalf. But when it comes to ORCID, the researcher needs to do it themselves. So they log into Pure. This is the overview screen that they see when they log in Pure. This is a personal profile. Right up front, the first thing we will show to them is that they can add their ORCID ID and they can connect it. They can authorize it. Once they click this and say, yes, I would like to authorize this, we show them this little pop-up where they can choose what they would like to do. Would they like to import things, or would they like to write things to ORCID? We give them the option so they can choose themselves. Also, on top of that, we also allow the institution to choose what would they like. Would they like to be able to export or the researcher in general should be able to. Import means that we are importing records from ORCID, that is publication records. Whatever they have in ORCID can be imported into Pure. Exporting means that we will send information about their affiliation. Institutions can choose whether they just want to send the institution name or they want to send what we call detailed information, where we also tell which department are they working on, which research groups are they working on. So we export that over to ORCID. We export the person's ID numbers, Scopus IDs, for instance, so they have sort of this collection of IDs. We will also send the portal URL, so this person's portal URL, so that will be stored in ORCID and showcased in ORCID. And then we can export his publications from Pure to ORCID. But all of that, the researcher needs to decide from when he or they set up this integration. What will happen next is that we actually push them over to ORCID. So now they are over at the ORCID side, where ORCID explains a little bit on what they are giving access to. So they will get this little screen, and then they can authorize the access and say, yes, now I'm okay with that. In that process, we get a token back in Pure, so we know that this has happened, and we store that. And then it looks like that. You will now be able to see when you get into the person overview screen that this person here has been authorized. He will have his ORCID ID, and if he decides on changing what he wants to do, he can go in and change it here and say, no, I don't want to send data anymore. I just want to import. He can go in and do that again. If he wants to cancel it altogether, he can go into ORCID and say, no, ORCID Pure should no longer be connected to my ORCID profile. So some easy steps, but it does require the researcher to log in and do this on his own. One of the things what do we then do? Now we have all of these cool authenticated ORCID IDs in Pure. What are we then doing with it? Well, first of all, when we import from online sources, the first thing we do is we try and map the publication coming in, the author information that we get from that source. We try and map it, first of all, by ID numbers. So if the source are sending us some ID numbers, we will try and match it. Should they be sending us ORCID IDs? For instance, we have an integration with DataCite. They send us ORCID IDs. We are now only matching it by authenticated IDs, because here we know for sure that this ORCID ID is correct. So importing, we use these authenticated ORCID IDs. If you want to set up an automated search, so this is the search where we once a week check ORCID, do you have any records that belongs to me and I should put into Pure? Well, we can do that, but only on authorized ORCID, so we know for sure that it's the right number. We also use it when we are sending data out of Pure. From one of the instances, from within Pure, you can mint a DOI on your content, you can mint DOIs on research output, you can mint DOIs on your data sets, and we are using DataSite for that. When we do that, we send data to a DataSite about the author, and it's stored over in DataSite. But we also now send ORCID IDs, but only the authenticated ones, the ones where we know it's correct. So we don't pollute DataSite with with an ORCID that perhaps were incorrect. So that is what we do. Then there's a few things that we don't do, but we should and we will. One of the things is on our portal, we have an ORCID icon. If we have the ORCID ID in Pure, we have an ORCID icon. We're going to change it a tiny bit here soon. So the ORCID IDs will change color depending on whether or not they are authenticated. And I think it needs to be green. And if it's not authenticated, but just one we have and we think is correct, but haven't been authenticated, then it will be gray. I think that's the pattern. We haven't done that yet, but we will be soon. The thing is that we're working on a new Pure portal, and here these will come into place. We also have a few places where we put ORCID into CVs, and there we will do the same for that. So that's coming. But we want to make ORCID actionable. We want to use ORCID so we can find the correct content for people, and we can send the correct ORCID out in the world so other people can use it. Oh, we love when import sources send us ORCID IDs. That is the best, because then we can use it for matching. So therefore, we also want to send ORCID IDs out whenever we can, so other systems would have the same benefit of data from Pure. Yeah. Automated search, this is just a screenshot. I mentioned it already. This is how it looks. So on the left side, I have a picture of setting up an automated search, but you don't have an ORCID, authenticated ORCID. We'll let you know that you cannot turn this on until you have done this authentication. On the right side, you can see now we have authenticated, and now we can search by this ORCID ID, and once a week pull in whatever we find that matches these ID numbers. Yes. We, as I mentioned in the beginning, are doing a lot of things with ORCID. It is our best friend. So we are trying the best we can to keep up to date, what means that we were very recently just added, just for those of you who know Pure, we just updated to the new work types that was introduced in ORCID. We did that in the spring here. So now we can both import and export to these new types here, and also not export to the types that no longer exist in ORCIDs. We also just introduced the authenticated ORCID into a DataSite integration. Upcoming changes, we are currently working on our OAI PMH OpenNet DC format, where we also are going to include these authorized ORCIDs, and a lot of other enhancements are coming along the way. Yes. The final thing that's going to happen in this autumn here is looking into how do we actually handle ORCID when it comes to people who has left the institution. We want to update our logic on that. I do think that was what I brought along today to talk a little bit about how Pure and ORCID works together.
Wonderful. Thank you, Milena. That was a great presentation, and we have a lot of questions already in our Q&A. So we'll just go ahead and dive in. One of our first questions is, how does Pure manage disambiguation of organizations?
Organizations are, so it depends a little bit on what the question is. So if it's in import or it is just in Pure in general, so there's a lot of, organizations are a fun thing. But if it comes to internal organizations, so setting up the organizations that you have in your institution, here We leave it up to the organization to build their own organizational hierarchy. We allow them to decide what is the best way to put your foot forward as an institution, which kind of organizations would you like? And we build it up in a hierarchy, and we have some internal processes on making sure that we can close down organization when they no longer exist. And we have something we call it taken over by. So when two departments get merged into one, the new organization can take over for the two old institutions and the content related to that. All of that can be handled manually in Pure if you want to, but we can also synchronize it if you have it in some system already in Pure. So that is when it comes to internal. Disambiguation of what we will refer to as external organizations. So in organizations that's not within your institution, but organizations you are collaborating with outside your own institution. So me, I came out of Aalborg University. How often do we collaborate with Manchester University or New York University? Those two would be external organization. Disambiguation on that is tricky. It is tricky. What we do is we rely on Scopus affiliation information. We have jobs that can pull in Scopus information on affiliations. We also have it. We have an add-on called Org Resolver that can help universities on handling that. But it is, I cannot say it with, it is tricky because we can get publications with 2,000 authors, and here we will have 2,000 external organizations to handle, and all sources handle organizations differently. Some abbreviated versions and some full versions, some only give us the institution, some give us departments and all of that. But we have tools in place to help deduplicate, and we have tools in place that can help you also build up hierarchies on external organization. But it's not a trivial thing.
Wonderful. That's a very detailed answer. Thank you. And if the person who submitted this question would like to add any more detail, Shiv, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to quickly ask Milena. I think I'm right in thinking that Pure supports raw IDs. Is that right? The registry, the research organization.
Yeah, we do support raw IDs. We don't currently have anything where we can import raw IDs sort of automatically, but we do have a few clients who have added raw IDs using our Write API, so adding data into the Write API. But we do support raw IDs.
Great. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for adding that, Shiv. Our next question is, will it be possible to export other Pure content types to ORCID? For example, projects, prizes and awards, activities, etc.
Currently, it is research output and it is affiliation person data. But we have considered expanding it a bit more. I think personally, I would like to go for something on project. We have also talked about what we in Pure refer to as activities. But our activity model, because activities are very fluffy, you could say, our activity model doesn't necessarily compare to what you would see as activities in ORCID. So it's a little bit more of a mapping exercise that's interesting there. Projects is interesting for something to look into. Data sets. Yeah.
Lots
It is
to do there.
It is on our to-do.
Good to know. I think this came early in the presentation. If someone is just looking for clarification on how often Pure updates from ORCID, is that on a weekly basis or how often is it updated?
Our standard is that we look into ORCID once a week for each researcher. We will look once every 7 days. Is there anything new in ORCID? Pushing to ORCID is actually done daily. So we push to ORCID daily. So if they add something into Pure, we are pushing it right away. But I also think we have the option. So if the researcher really wants his things to go into ORCID straight away because he needs to pull out a CV from ORCID right now, he can do a manual push in Pure to ORCID. But else sending from Pure to ORCID is a daily, and the other way as default once a week.
Great, thank you. And that was actually going to be my next question, if you could do it manually to get that. So thank you for answering that as well. Our next question is, do you suggest or offer best practices for enticing researchers to authenticate their ORCID ID within Pure? And Shiv, maybe you want to add to it after Melina answers.
We try and tell our institutions all the benefits they can get out of integrating with ORCID. We tell them all the cool things we build, and we tell them why that we think that could be an interesting solution for them. On top of that, it is actually up to the institution to choose whether they think they want to do that, if they want to go out to their researcher to do that. But I think you should come and join us in our conference in Portugal. We are having a conference, what is it, Shiv, in the beginning of November, where we have a few ORCID presentations also from our client side on why they have spent time integrating and getting their researchers involved in the ORCID within the institution. Please come join us in Portugal and listening in. And if not, we are making these recordings also available afterwards. But if you come in person, we can have a talk also.
Shiv, did you want to add anything about researchers authenticating the ORCID IDs?
Sure, I think you could probably speak to this better than I could, Kimberly, but I think our ORCID's comms team have also provided an advocacy toolkit, which institutions can use to encourage researchers to use ORCID and also use it wherever they can in terms of authenticating and connecting their ORCID ID. But that's a toolkit that institutions and other stakeholders can use to engage with their researchers to explain the benefits of ORCID and also why they should connect and how it would save them time and effort. So maybe that's a resource you could share in the follow-up email as well, Kimberly? Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Great, thanks.
Our next question is, what happens if a researcher has managed to register more than one ORCID and uses more than one? Will the system flag this?
In Pure, you can only have one. We have put a hard-code limit on it. You can only have one ORCID ID in Pure. So he has to choose, and then he needs to contact ORCID to clean up, let's say, the mess. I laugh a little bit because my husband had, I think, 7 ORCIDs, and I was shouting at him. So he's always my good example. But we can only store one in Pure.
So I guess in relation to that question, if we can only store one in Pure, is there a way for them to change their ORCID ID if they've put in a wrong one or an old one or one they want to get rid of?
Yeah, they have full control of their profile, so they are able to change that, and they will then need to re-authenticate the new one.
Great, thank you.
Just to
Shiv,
add
did you want to add?
Yes, to add from the ORCID side, we encourage users to deprecate and consolidate their ORCID IDs if they have mistakenly registered multiple ORCID IDs. We recognize that sometimes when researchers change institution, they may lose access to their old email address and they may not remember that they've created an ORCID ID in the past, but that might be one reason they may have more than one ORCID ID. We do have support processes, so they can get in touch with our support team to actually consolidate those records and consolidate down to a single active record. But we also recognize that there may be valid use cases for when a researcher might maintain what we call a pseudonymous ORCID record, and there are best practices around that as well, where they're perhaps engaged in sensitive research topics or are researching in a particular country where they may need to maintain an external international profile that is separate to their internal one. So we understand that as well.
Thanks for the additional context, Shiv. I do see a couple of hands raised. If you want to go ahead and submit your questions through the Q&A, we'll get to them that way. So thank you. Our next question is, recently ORCID added new work types to support arts and humanities content. Are there future plans to consider them for export from Pure to ORCID?
We could already do that. So what we do in Pure is that we allowed, now it gets a little bit complex. Yes, our standard model in Pure exports to ORCID and are including those new output types. We pulled that in, I think, less than a month after ORCID made it public. We updated Pure to import and export those types. what you need to know about Pure is that we come with a sort of, let's say, a set of publication types, journal articles, letters, books, chapters, and books. So Pure is built with sort of a standard set of that. For that, we have created a mapping file in Pure. So we would say if it's an article, it goes over here in ORCID. If it is a book, we'll go over here in ORCID. If our clients have chosen to add new content or new publication types, they would have to go in and update their ORCID mapping file individually for those that is out of our standard. And they can do that, and we can help them out if they have any issues on it. But our standard templates, types in Pure are mapped to the new types that came in. What was it? Was it February? I can't remember, something like that.
End of January, yeah.
Yeah. So Pure is already mapping to those. There was a few you deprecated or collided into one type in ORCID, and we have also cleaned up that in Pure. So we map to we don't map to something that doesn't exist anymore. So we should be up to date.
Thanks, Melina. Our next question, I think we've already covered it, but just in case not, I'll ask it anyway. Does Pure use an organizational identifier?
Yeah. So we do have a different organization identifier. It could be a Scopus affiliation ID, it could be raw ID, if that exists. Yeah. Cyber ID
Great.
also. We have we have a few to pick.
Great. Our next question is, how does Pure pull in data sets from places like Dryad to connect them with faculty profiles in Pure?
We have recently changed up until recently, Elsevier had a service called Data Monitor that has been sunset. So what we have built this summer is an integration directly to DataSite where we can pull in data sets from DataSite. And I know was it Dryad is in some cases at least minting DOIs in DataSite. So we are pulling in those in Pure. And we also use DataSite to update existing records in Pure. So if you have some data sets in Pure, put in manually with a DOI, we can pull data from DataSite and update your records so they are up to pair.
Great, thank you. Our next question, this may be more of an ORCID question, but I'll pose it anyway. Is it possible to receive contact details for researchers who have multiple ORCID IDs to help them merge it? So I guess the question would be, if we can see that a researcher has multiple ORCID IDs as an institution, is there a way that we can reach out to them, we being the institution, to let them know you have multiple, let's merge them?
Sorry, was that a question for us, Kimberly? Was
I
that
think it's going to be an ORCID question, yeah.
Was that Anita's question in the chat there? Just to double check.
Yep.
Okay, I think I was just about to type a reply to Anita there, but I think she's asking, can you please share the contact details for researchers to merge multiple ORCID IDs? So what are the contact details for ORCID? So researchers can get in touch with us to merge IDs, and the email address is support@orcid.org. But I'm also going to add here the contact web form on our actual info site on our web page, which allows them to also. Oh, is that answered or has that disappeared? Probably. I've just typed that in, but
yeah, once you answer the question, it moves over to the answer profile.
Right. So
Yep.
yes, there is a web form on our website as well where researchers can select, I have more than one ORCID ID, and that can give them information on how to get in touch with us and deprecate and consolidate those.
Great, thank you. And then Melina, once they've consolidated their ORCID IDs and they realize they've consolidated into the one that's not associated with Pure, are they able to reach out to your team and get that fixed?
No, the best they can do is log into Pure themselves and change it in there and then authorize it again. So when it comes to that, we don't as such handle data on the Elsevier side. We handle the system that enabled them to handle data. So we are not in that way responsible for it, but they can log into Pure, change the ORCID ID, authenticate it again, and we should up and running again.
Excellent. There's a couple of questions now that are focusing on other platforms and integrations with Pure, such as, are you planning on integrations between Interfolio and Pure?
We do have some already, so it depends on what they exactly are looking for. But yes, Interfolio's faculty activity report is something that is interesting. It depends a little bit on the setup. That's something, if the client wants to talk more about it, please reach out and we can, but absolutely, we have some plans. We have many plans.
Awesome. And then there's couple of questions here again about other platforms that we may need a little more information on, but I'll start asking the question and then that person can submit more information if they'd like. But it's about auto updates on different platforms. When data is updated on one platform, such as papers and articles, they're not seeing those updates getting pushed, I believe, to Pure. Or
yeah, and that depends a little bit on actually many things. First of all, which sources it is, and also how your Pure is set up, which jobs are running, and so on. But one of my favorite features in Pure is something we call available updates. And so what this feature does is that it compares the record you have stored in Pure up against the import sources that you have set up in your Pure, and check, is the field on field by field, are we alike? And if we are not alike, then we will notify you and saying, hey, this title, you have the same DOI number, but the title is different. Would you like to keep the title you have in your Pure, or would you like to update it with whatever the source is telling you? It's called available updates. On top of that, there is some logical rules to that. So you could say, hey, I can see that we don't have a keyword. If we don't have a keyword in Pure, but there's a keyword in PubMed, let's just bring it in. I don't have to touch that. Just bring it into Pure. So there is a logical rule saying just accept these changes. So we have a logical, for those of you who have Pure as a system, try and check out our help center and search for available updates. It's the coolest functionality. When it comes to Scopus, we have some other things we can do. There we have some jobs that can do automatically keep your Pure more or less up to date with what Scopus is bringing you, but still keeping control in Pure. So we don't automatically override whatever you have done manually in Pure, but we update you with what Scopus is telling you if you haven't manually touched it. So it depends on the source and it depends on you as a client what you would like to. But no, we don't automatically override in most cases what you have done in Pure. It's a thing you have control of your data, but we will help you find differences.
sounds good. Hopefully that answers the question there. If not, please feel free to submit an additional question or some more context. Another question we have is, we already have authenticated ORCIDs in one system, but we are about to start with Pure. Can we pre-populate researcher records with a suggested ID that they can then authenticate via Pure?
Yes, we can. We can pre-populate it and then they log in and authenticate their ORCID in Pure. But we can, with our HR synchronization, we can pre-populate it. We can write it in many places. So if you already have the ORCID IDs, yes, we can, but they all still have to authenticate in Pure.
Wonderful. It looks like there's some good conversation going on in the Q&A between an attendee and our Associate Director of Engagement, Paloma. So I'll direct folks to take a look at that, but it's about making ORCID imports more attractive. I think we still have about 10 minutes for questions if folks would like to submit anything else while we have Milena and Shiv on the line. I suppose my question for the both of you would be, for institutions that are looking to, like, their recent ORCID members and they're looking to integrate and they know they already have Pure, how would they get started with the process of making that connection between their Pure system that they already have and their new ORCID membership?
My first suggestion would be to go to the Pure Help Center because we have really good documentation on what it requires, how they set it up, how do they set it up in Pure, how do they reach out to ORCID and all of that to get the keys needed for setting this up. So there's much help on our help center on it. I also know if they are a little bit interested in it, we have had our Pure conference running for 10 years. Most of the presentation has been recorded, and I know there's presentations on integration between Pure and ORCID there. I haven't brought along any today, but we can also, these are publicly available. You can go in and have a look. So we have a lot of info on our help center on the Pure ORCID integration. And if they are new to Pure and being implemented, our implementation manager who's holding their hands through that process of being implemented has a lot of knowledge on ORCID also and will be able to help them out also. And our Pure support loves questions.
Great. Shiv, anything you want to add about ORCID members and turning on their various integrations that are available to them?
Just to mention that one of the benefits of Pure being a certified service provider system, as I said, is faster integration. So for non-certified systems, institutions need to go through an integration review process to actually ensure that the integration meets our best practice or minimum requirements, rather. To actually exchange data with ORCID records. But because Pure is a certified system, institutions can request production member API credentials to actually use with the integration immediately. So that is one of the key benefits of Pure being a certified system. So on the ORCID website, we have a web form, a request form for requesting production member API credentials. So once they've had a discussion with their Pure contact, they can actually, the institution can either request those credentials or the Pure team member can request that on their behalf. And that can be used to then set up the integration and get them going. So it's much faster than a bespoke system or a non-certified system, which needs to go through individual reviews.
Great, thank you. We have a few more minutes for questions, so I'll give folks just another minute or two to submit anything to the Q&A that is pressing. In the meantime, I'm going to share a link in the chat to our upcoming events calendar and also our on-demand. We have an exciting webinar next Tuesday featuring Adam Day of Clear Skies. He's going to be talking about research integrity and how Clear Skies supports that. So would love to see everyone there. But if you're unable to join us live, you can always register and you'll receive the recordings afterward. Also, our recordings are available on ORCID On Demand, which is the second link in the chat, where you can check out webinars that we've done previously. And this one will also be available after the session. Not seeing any other questions come through. So Milena, I think you've done a wonderful job of answering everything that folks had. I would like to say thank you, Milena, for your wonderful presentation today, and Shiv for providing some excellent help here in the Q&A. And then I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing folks at our next webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Milena.